Hello and welcome to a special Christmas edition of Flight Sim Alaska. I'm Dave, the armchair bush pilot. Today we are in Fairbanks, Alaska, and we're going to head over to North Pole. So sit back, relax, leave me a like. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, and let's get this aircraft into the air. Alright, so today we are in X-Cub. Again, we are in Fairbanks, Alaska, which is more or less at the heart of the state of Alaska. And we are cold and dark, so let's go ahead and get this Cub started, shall we? Get all these things done. Now, I do have a new piece of equipment that I'm goofing off with here. I have the Honeycomb Aeronautical flight yoke, which is pretty neat, and I'm still trying to figure out how to use it. Dramatically increases my, I guess it increases the flight experience. Anyways, I'm enjoying it. It's great. It's great thing to use, but I am still trying to work it out. Alright, so let's see. Got all that ready to go. Let's start it up. Awesome. I think that worked cool. So here we are. Let's go ahead and check my trim wheel real quick. I kind of got to center it every time. That's what's going on right here. Alright, awesome. Let's ask for permission to get out of here, shall we?
Fairbanks Ground ACBP 444 with Whiskey request taxi to the active departing straight out.
ACBP 444 taxi to and hold short of runway 20 right using taxiway Alpha Echo cross runway 20 left Echo Delta Foxtrot. Contact tower on 118 decimal tree when ready.
Taxi to and hold short runway 20 right via taxiway Alpha Echo cross runway 20 left Echo Delta Foxtrot ACBP 444.
Alright, cool. I think we can get going now. So as I said, we've set ourselves up here on December 25th. We're just a little bit after noon. It's about 1 p.m. I think is what I've set in the simulator. And I've thrown some snow on the ground here to make it look somewhat authentic. Over here is Chena Ridge, north end of Fairbanks there. And again, we're in the Fairbanks International Airport. And let's see if I can navigate ourselves to that active runway here. So what we're going to do is we're going to head south to North Pole, Alaska, and we're going to see if we can't find Santa Claus house. That is what we're going to do today. And along the way, of course, we'll talk a little bit about Fairbanks and what I know about the place. I haven't spent a lot of time researching additional stuff about Fairbanks beyond my general knowledge. So let's see here. I think this is where we want to cross our active runways here, or our runway. Yeah, I think that works. So this time of year in Fairbanks, it looks just like this. This is about 1 o'clock. You will expect the sun to be low like this. It's not like Utqiagvik, or formerly known as Barrow, where the sun sets completely for a few months. In this place, it just goes down and hangs out on that southern horizon for a while, just above the Alaska ring. And it's pretty. This is pretty authentic. This is what you might expect to see. As far as temperatures go in Fairbanks this time of year, 20 below is probably about what you'd expect for normal cold, something in that range, or negative 20s. We're talking Fahrenheit here. It's not uncommon to see 30 below and 40 below, and sometimes 50 and even pushing 60 below. When I lived in Fairbanks some 20 years ago, I believe it hit 50 below, and that was some of the worst outside weather ever. If you've never been in that kind of temperature, one thing I will say is that you go outside and it's very, very immediately cold. It's so cold that you can't really touch anything metal without gloves. It's sort of like that Christmas show, A Christmas Story, the You'll Shoot Your Eye Out one with Ralphie, and he gets dared to stick his tongue on a flagpole. Well, it's like that here, but with your hands. You just can't touch anything. I remember immediately after moving out of Fairbanks and moving actually to Maryland, of all places, for a year. And I remember it was a cold day. It was cold and damp, and Maryland gets really cold in its own special way. Just really wet cold. And I remember approaching a door and trying to get myself to reach out and grab it and not slip my hand into my sleeve so I didn't burn my fingers. And it was very satisfying to touch that door handle and find it it was warm. So anyway, that's my story there. Let's go ahead and ask for permission to take off, shall we?
Fairbanks Tower ACBP 444 ready at runway 20 right straight out departure.
ACBP 444 cleared for takeoff runway 20 right straight out departure approved.
Cleared for takeoff runway 20 right ACBP 444.
Okay, cool. I think we're good to go. Let's go ahead and take that parking brake off and start to start to taxi, shall we? Directly ahead of us is the terminal. Only about, I want to say 4 or 5 gates there. I don't remember exactly. But normally you'll see a couple of 737s parked there. That's typically what you see. Or you have a Dash 8 that came from Anchorage. We do get 747s up here for cargo and whatnot. Very rarely are those used for passenger. Of course, they're not really used for passenger service these days anyhow. And then, of course, we see these large fuel tanker turboprops that run out to the villages with fuel and stuff. So that's kind of commonly what you'll hear. And one interesting thing is when it gets cold here, you can hear the jets idling on this at this airport from several miles away. When it gets super duper cold, that clear air or that cold air just really carries sound super well. So you can hear the railroad passing by. Well, of course, I guess you could from the university anyways, it's very close, but certainly what you hear are the jets, and it's just remarkable. It kind of sounds like you're just a few feet away from them. All right, cool. So we're gonna head west for a little bit, and then we'll come around and we'll do a quick look-see of Fairbanks. So if we were to continue west here, we'd pretty much hit Nenana. We flew out of Nenana in a previous video. That was an ILS landing here in Fairbanks, just for fun. This here is the Tanana River we're about to cross over. I know what's going on with this alarm. I feel like sometimes this thing gives me alarms. I simply can't identify the problem. Maybe it was more of a PSI issue. I don't know. Okay. Anyways, this Tanana River here. This should, of course, be frozen up in the wintertime like this. That's what you'd normally expect to see. In fact, so much that down in Nenana, they have the Nenana Ice Classic, just a handful of miles downriver there. And what they do is they put a giant tripod up and take bets. I guess they make a pool. They don't really take bets. They make a pool on just when that tripod is going to fall in. And the person or people closest to the time will share in that pot. And there's that airport off to our left here. And as you look further to your left, you would expect to see the university up here. It doesn't really turn up until you get much, much closer in the sim, is the way the level of detail stuff works. But this would be the university over here. Thinking about Fairbanks, there's a handful of major industries that really drive Fairbanks as an economy. You've got the university here. That's a really important one. That's how I know Fairbanks. You've got the Army bases here, so Fort Wainwright off in this direction, Eielson off that direction, which is an Air Force base. And then you have extraction types of things. So we're talking about mining, gold mining being a huge thing all throughout this area, just littered with historical mining stuff all over the place. And that might come for a different video just because there's so much to say about it. And then, of course, oil is another big one. Trans-Alaska Pipeline, or the Alyeska Pipeline, or we just call it the pipeline, does run through Fairbanks. North of Fairbanks, there's a place where it's above ground. There's many spots it's above ground and many spots it's below ground. I think a lot of us are familiar with the pipeline from its above ground shots, pictures. And you do see that here. You can drive north of Fairbanks and see that Trans-Alaska Pipeline. And so there is a refinery down in North Pole. I'm not sure if it's still active anymore, but that's where it was. And then tourism, of course, being another major component. This being sort of the end point for so many Princess tours, for example, and then Holland America and other places. They'll come up here, and there's a ton of hotels, just a ton of hotels all throughout here that you can stay at as people come up, and they'll stay for their end point of their Alaska vacation, or perhaps the beginning point, but I think usually the end point. And then here's downtown Fairbanks. Fairbanks is a city of, like, I want to say 80,000 people. It's the second largest city in all of Alaska, and it's located right in the heart of the state, pretty much, and it's often called Alaska's Golden Heart because because of the gold mining activity and the fact that it is so close to the center of this state. So, something to point out about this. So there's this Chena River, winds right through downtown here. That Chena River is this spot right around here, actually, where my mouse is. That is either the start or the end point of the Yukon Quest sled dog race. Now that Yukon Quest...
ACBP 444, you are leaving my airspace. Frequency change approved.
Fairbanks Tower ACBP 444 frequency change.
Now that Yukon Quest either starts or ends here, and the other endpoint is in Whitehorse, Yukon Territory, Canada, and they alternate starting point and end point. So alternate years, it starts here and then it ends here in those other years. And so if you ever see that Yukon Quest starting or ending here in Fairbanks, this is where it's at, right in there. And an interesting thing about downtown Fairbanks that I personally hate isn't Fairbanks downtown. It's all the one-way streets. It's confounding. It's one of the most difficult places to drive and figure your way out outside of perhaps Washington, D.C. Granted, that's a hyperbolic personal opinion, but that's how I feel about it after spending 45 minutes trying to drive around and figure out how to get to the post office when I was a teenager. It was very, very not awesome. These days, I have better luck with it. Right here is Fort Wainwright, big landing strip here. I've never actually been on Fort Wainwright. I'm not a soldier. I'm not a former military person at all. But I have been, I think I went through the gates once with a friend who got sick, and he was, I forget what happened, but he had to go to the hospital on base here, and we're dropping him off. That's the end of my experience. Anyway, and maybe I'm misremembering that. It was more than 20 years. All right, cool. So, Kanawha River, again, should be frozen. Let's see, what else haven't I said about Fairbanks? Maybe we could talk about how doggone dry this place is. Frequently you hear it called a polar desert, Arctic desert, and technically it gets just enough rain to have trees but still be considered a desert somehow. At least this is how I've heard it, and I might be wrong about that. I might be willing to own that, but it's doggone dry, particularly in the wintertime. Now, to go along with like everything freezing the minute you touch it, or just going outside and being instantaneously cold in a way that most people never having experienced this kind of cold, would not dream of. It's dry, and the key sort of thing that happens when it gets super dry in a place like this is static electricity. Now, in the university, the worst place that this manifested itself was on, I think, like the second floor of the library at the university, which is where at the time they kept the periodicals, and they had these big metal stacks. And nothing is worse than being in that library in the stacks and bending over to pick up a periodical, and suddenly a thunderbolt of static electricity shoots out and gets you right in the back. Zap! But it happened to me all the doggone time. Or if you got your hand too close to the stacks, zap! They'd get you. It was not nice at all. But I mean, whatever. I mean, it's sort of the worst thing in the world, in kind of a first world, worst thing in the world kind of way. But that's kind of some of the stuff that would happen, and the same is true, like just running around campus or whatever, being in the dorms or just living anywhere. You get static electricity building up way faster than you normally would in other places. The reason that this is a holiday, or say a Christmas flight, is because we're not just going to North Pole, but we're going to swing by Santa Claus house, which is in North Pole, Alaska. Most people seem to think it's actually at the physical North Pole of the world, but it's actually at North Pole, Alaska. Evidenced by when you write to Santa Claus and you address it to North Pole, they come here. And when Santa Claus writes you back, you know what? They're addressed from here, because this is where Santa Claus house is. And it is road connected, so you can come out here, and say you come up to Fairbanks for a summer trip, and you can actually take this Richardson Highway south of Fairbanks, 13 or so miles, right out to North Pole and stop there. It's just right on the highway. So that's what we're gonna do, and I think it's pretty darn cool. So let's, as we try to approach and figure out where the heck it is. Actually, let's get back to our map. I don't know why the heck it's doing this. Let's see if I can figure out why this is giving me that. That's what we want to do. Cool. So this is the airport we want to land at here. We're going to swing around and do this jazz. And zoom out a bit. That's not what I meant to do. See? Cool. So what we want to do is, I guess we can probably zoom in. This is a touch screen, unlike the other one. So it's kind of down in this direction is where we're headed, and we're going to look back, like I said. Okay, cool. So let's look at the scenery here and how beautiful this is. Realistically, when you're here in Fairbanks and you're standing, let's say, on the west ridge of UAF campus, which is kind of high up at those foothills, those Chena Hills there, and Chena Ridge, you can see the Alaska Range. It's just absolutely gorgeous, breathtaking every time. I walked every day to campus, onto upper campus to do classes, and I usually have their natural science classes up in that direction. You'd see this, and you'd hear the snow crunching in a really squeaky way under your feet as you walk past this. It was absolutely stunning. The only hard part about it is that your nostrils were frozen together because it was 35 below, and you had to wear a scarf, and even then everything was frozen. Eyelashes frozen, nostrils frozen. This is no bueno. It gets so darn cold up here. Okay, so here's another story. This is good stuff. If you're not from Alaska, or particularly from Fairbanks, this might sound kind of ridiculous, but it's absolutely the truth. In Fairbanks, there's a lot of people that don't have running water, and there's a lot of reasons for that. One of the reasons is that it's a ton of permafrost in here, and so you're not going to really dig down and find a reservoir down there. And what's more is that the water that is down below, it tends to be really full of arsenic, and so it's not really that consumable. And so as a result, people they don't have wells, they have holding tanks instead. And when you don't have water or well, you're not going to have a septic tank, right? And you also don't necessarily have city water, which means you have to go to the bathroom somewhere, and that somewhere is typically outhouses. Well, you can imagine that in outhouses, everything freezes in the wintertime, which is great because it doesn't stink. But it's not so great because the stuff kind of piles up in this giant spike of waste and things. And when in college, we used to jokingly call it the poopsicle, and sometimes have to be knocked down with a broom handle. So that's a fun, very real, very graphic description of something that you might experience living in Fairbanks. I never did myself. I stayed in the dorms or apartments, and I thought that was just fine. I am about as urban as you can get and still be an Alaskan, which is really still, for a lot of people, doesn't mean a whole lot. It's still pretty. We do a lot of remote stuff here. So we're coming up on Santa Claus House, and of course it's just right on the Richardson Highway. Now this Richardson Highway, if you take it, will take you down towards Delta Junction and down towards Tok. And Tok, of course, is the cutoff between. It'll take you between, say, Glen Allen and parts east, which is to say Whitehorse, Yukon Territory, and of course Glen Allen would then take you either towards Valdez or towards Wasilla and then Anchorage for the region I'm from. So now we are flying right over now, and I always get confused because it's a little hard to see, but this here, that is Santa Claus House right here. You can come, you can visit it, you can stop. There's Santa Claus House. It doesn't look great in the simulator. I did not have time to learn Blender and make one that was representative of our Santa Claus house, but there it is, and you can come visit it. So there we are. This is North Pole, Alaska, where Santa Claus House is. I think it's kind of a lot of fun and a neat thing to do. Man, this is so gorgeous. I just can't. I love being outside when it's like this in the wintertime, because it's kind of like this where I'm at too. This is granted, several hundred miles north of where I live, but it's not very different in the wintertime when it gets, kind of later in the afternoon. This here is about, like I said, 1 o'clock when we took off, and so authentic to the experience here. The one main difference I will point out that I should have over Fairbanks is that what we don't see are these huge billowing clouds that go straight up from different smokestacks, either from individual houses. So what I'm talking about here is when you've got your wood stoves or just exhaust of any sort going up, particularly from the power plants, you get these clouds that go straight up, even on a clear day. And so you would fly through Fairbanks or North Pole and see those. And frequently, if it gets colder than 40 below, you'll see this will all be covered in ice fog. And a lot of that ice fog actually does come from pollution from wood-fired stoves, which is a really common way to heat in this region because it's inexpensive and there's no natural gas piped into here, which is amazing because it's right on the pipeline corridor. You'd think we'd have ways to heat our houses in that way, but we don't. So wood smoke is used, and people here are very, very strong and independent, and they don't like being told that they need to clean up their act because who the hell are you to tell them what to do? And I'm not trying to be judgmental about that. It's just nature of the folks out here, and you know what? If you want to live out here, you kind of I feel like sometimes you kind of gotta be that way. Gotta be a little bit strong, a little bit independent. Not gonna make it in a harsh landscape like this. Well, I mean, I guess you could. Anyways, so I think I found the landing strip I want to come in at here. I'm not gonna goof around with ATC. I'm a pain in the butt right now. But we'll land. See if I can do this without crashing and leave you with a great view of the Alaska Range to our south, and the midnight sun hovering on the southern horizon. It's not really the midnight sun, it's hardly the daytime sun. But look at that. Man, the simulator just really nails it, doesn't it? It'd be super great if this particular runway had a little bit of lights, but not. I don't feel like modding this one. Cool. I think we might land okay on this. I gotta say, this new yoke that I got is way better than the silly joystick. The joystick was really good, I liked it, but boy, this is just so much easier. Even when I crash and bounce. Cool. I didn't really crash. That wasn't the best landing ever, but it is what it is. So anyway, thank you so much for hanging out with me on our flight from Fairbanks to North Pole and checking out Santa Claus house. Wasn't super duper exciting, but hopefully you enjoyed it. Learned a couple of things about the interior and Alaska's second largest city. If you did enjoy it, leave me a like. I'd appreciate that. Subscribe if you'd like to see more Alaska content, a little bit more history and demography. Otherwise, thank you so much for hanging out with me. I really appreciate it, and I'll check you out in the next video.